Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. I want you to imagine, just for a second, putting on the hat of a historical investigator. You're digging through ancient, dusty archives, and you suddenly discover a text that claims to fill in the missing pieces of the creation story, the secret lives of the patriarchs, and literally the hidden laws of the universe. Well, that is exactly what we have with the Book of Jubilees. Sometimes called Little Genesis, this text was actually banned from the mainstream Christian Bible, but it was miraculously preserved within the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition. So today, we're going to team up as researchers and examine exactly why this fascinating, controversial document was completely excluded from the canon.
And that brings us to the central mystery of our investigation today. Think about this. What if the Bible we know is missing the hidden laws of time itself? The Book of Jubilees doesn't just add a few minor, colorful details. No, it radically alters our entire understanding of how the universe measures time and how the very earliest figures of Genesis interacted with the divine. So, why was a text that claims to hold the ultimate blueprint for cosmic order left on the cutting room floor by the early church? Let's look at the evidence.
All right, let's open up the case file on our first major piece of evidence. Exhibit A, the cosmic calendar.
Now, in our modern world, we totally take calendars for granted, right? But according to Jubilees, there was a fierce, fundamental controversy back then over timekeeping, and getting it wrong, that was considered an absolute spiritual disaster. While many ancient cultures, including the Israelites eventually, adopted a lunar calendar, Jubilees insists that the lunar calendar is a total corruption. Instead, it champions a rigid, unchanging solar calendar as the one and only divinely acceptable way to track time. It represents perfect divine order with fixed, predictable seasons. For the author of Jubilees, following the shifting moon wasn't just a simple miscalculation, it was a form of active spiritual disobedience.
So, why was this solar calendar so highly prized? Well, look at the math here. It is all about perfect mathematical symmetry. The Jubilee year consists of exactly 364 days. That divides perfectly into 4 seasons of 91 days each. Each of those seasons has precisely 13 weeks, giving you a total of exactly 52 weeks in a year. Because 364 is perfectly divisible by 7, this rigid structure ensures that sacred festivals, and especially the Sabbath, always mathematically land on the exact same day of the week every single year. It's like a giant puzzle where every piece fits perfectly. It is a system of absolute, unwavering cosmic order.
And to understand just how seriously they took this, listen to this direct piece of evidence from Jubilees chapter 6, verse 37. It says, "There will be those who will surely make observations of the moon, but they will disturb the seasons." The text explicitly warns against lunar observations, framing that shifting lunar calendar as a dangerous force that actively leads humanity into spiritual chaos, basically causing them to observe sacred days completely incorrectly.
Okay, moving right along to our next case file. Exhibit B, the angelic order.
You see, Jubilees doesn't just restructure time, it completely restructures the spiritual hierarchy of the Genesis narrative. Angels in this text, they aren't just mere messengers popping in and out of the story to deliver a quick word. According to the text, they were created on the very first day of creation. They are these active, powerful mediators who govern the cosmic cycles and the movements of the sun and stars. Furthermore, they are the ones who directly instructed Adam on the holy laws. And perhaps most dramatically, they are actively engaged in spiritual warfare against a demonic figure named Mistema. Basically, these angels maintain the very fabric of the universe.
And this shift, it radically alters some of the most famous stories we know. Take the binding of Isaac, for example. In standard Genesis, this is an intensely personal test of faith directly commanded by God. But Jubilees reframes this entirely. It introduces Mastema, an evil angel kind of similar to Satan, who actually instigates the test. So suddenly, a deeply personal trial is transformed into a massive, cosmic war between good and evil playing out right there on Earth.
We can actually see this vividly in the primary source text, specifically Jubilees 18:10. The text reads, "And I stood before him and before the prince of the Mastema." Here we have direct evidence of an angel, that's the I speaking in this quote, actively intervening to protect Abraham from demonic forces that are literally rooting for his failure. The spiritual stakes are raised to an absolutely cosmic level.
Let's crack open our third, and honestly, probably the most controversial exhibit, rewriting Genesis.
So it's one thing to add angels and change calendars, right? But Jubilees literally rewrites history to make the patriarchs followers of a legal code that officially didn't even exist yet. According to this text, Adam was taught the Sabbath and purity laws by angels. Noah observed laws of sacrifice. Abraham observed the Sabbath long before the events of Mount Sinai. The text is making the bold claim that these figures observed the Mosaic law thousands of years before Moses was even born. In this version, Moses merely received the final, complete written copy of laws that the patriarchs had actually already been following all along.
So what exactly allows for this massive rewrite of history? Well, it all comes down to a central concept that drives the entire book: the heavenly tablets. These are a cosmic, pre-written record of God's eternal laws, prophecies, and the exact predestined history of the universe. Think of it like a divine script. Everything from the eternal law of circumcision to the precise timing of the Exodus was already written down in heaven since the very dawn of creation.
Because everything is pre-written on these tablets, the characters we thought we knew become kind of larger than life. Standard Genesis shows Abraham on a quiet, personal journey of obedience, leaving his homeland. But Jubilees, it adds this fascinating backstory, portraying a young Abraham as an idol-smashing revolutionary who rebels against his father's pagan practices, literally burning stone idols before fleeing. He isn't just obedient, he's a cosmic rebel, aligning himself with the heavenly tablets.
This whole reliance on the heavenly tablets introduces a really intense theme of predestination. Jacob was chosen from birth, while Esau was predestined to rebel. So their famous rivalry, it isn't just a bitter family dispute or a human squabble over birthright. In Jubilees, it is a pre-written cosmic war between two nations. Jacob's cunning actions to get the blessing were really just him fulfilling a divine plan that had already been etched in stone, or rather, heavenly tablets.
And this predestination applies to the next generation too. Listen to Jubilees 32:17. And Levi was set apart for the priesthood forever, for it was ordained on the heavenly tablets. The tribal roles of Jacob's sons didn't just develop organically over centuries of history. Levi's role as the priestly tribe, much like Judah's role as leaders, was entirely fixed in the heavens from the very beginning. No accidents, no coincidences.
Even the beloved story of Joseph gets this heavy, micromanaged treatment. When his brothers sell him into slavery, Jubilees notes this as a specific sin already recorded on the heavenly tablets, basically guaranteeing future punishment. Consequently, Joseph isn't just lucky to survive, he is actively guarded by angels on his terrifying journey to Egypt and ultimately rises to power to fulfill a pre-planned prophecy that would inevitably trigger the Exodus. Every single human action is just a gear turning in a massive, predestined cosmic clock.
All right, we have examined the evidence. Now it's time to bring it all together for the final verdict. Why was it banned?
So why didn't it make the cut? Well, the Book of Jubilees was likely just deemed way too radical for the early church. Its rigid obsession with a 364-day solar calendar directly conflicted with accepted, everyday practices. Its heavy reliance on angelic and demonic mediators shifted the focus away from God's direct interaction with humanity. On top of that, its extreme view of predestination really stripped the human element away from biblical heroes. And honestly, completely rewriting the origins of the Mosaic Law was simply a bridge too far for the canon.
And that leaves us with a really provocative thought to end our explainer today. Does a rigid divine calendar, an army of heavily involved angels, and a predestined script bring us closer to understanding a perfect divine order? Or, by removing the messy personal trials of figures like Abraham and Jacob, does it distract from the relatable, everyday human journey of faith? It is absolutely fascinating how just a few radical changes to an ancient text can completely redefine how we view history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep asking questions about the hidden corners of history.